Okay, we've done columns, just the simple method of putting a straight column in. What I want to do now is just go through a couple of tips and tricks that may help you along with using timber posts and columns and so on. The first thing I want to show you is basically a tapered column. Now, if you've got a tapered column, let's say it's 500 at the base and 300 at the top, and it's, you know, the height from the slab on your porch to underneath your eaves, we cannot produce with a column in Envisioneer that tapered effect. So the trick to that is to use a footing. So if I go to my footings and go to a mono footing, down the bottom there you can see, if I right click and go edit, this is how I create my tapered columns. So you'll see I've got it excuse me, 300 at the top, 500 at the bottom, and I'm saying it's 2400 high. Well, you can adjust that anytime you like to suit the correct height. So coming down to the type of column, I've selected a tapered column. I could select a cylinder type tapered if I want to. So basically, if I make that 500, which is at the base, the depth of it 500, the height of it I'm going to make 1, horizontal distance, which is the D, if I make that 100, it's basically giving me 100 around the edge, so that gives me a 300 by 300 in the middle, and then the vertical distance, if I make that 2400. Okay, so that's how I've created the tapered column. So if I hit OK on that, and I can just drop that in, right click and finish. I don't want that column in there, get rid of it. Actually, I might leave that there for the time being. I'll just move that over. So I'll move that from this point to that point. Now if I have a look at my camera that I placed in the previous lesson, you'll see that the column itself is buried into the ground. Why has that happened? It's because it's a footing. Okay, so all you have to do is come here into 3D, right click on it and elevate. Now if I elevate that up 2100, there's my column up where I wanted it to be. It gives you the visual effect for your elevations and everything else. Your quantities will be covered and everything's okay. Now, I left that timber post in there simply because if I now want only a sort of a 2/3 tapered column and the rest to be a timber column, then I need the two of them in there. So basically, if I now just change that to 1500 and click there, you'll notice that went down a little bit, and basically change the elevation of it, because you can see it's popped up 2400. So I'll make that say 1200 and let that pop down. And now what I've got there, if I just sort of spin around a little bit, is a tapered column with a timber post coming out of the middle of it. Now that's one trick or tip as far as columns are concerned. Another trick that you can do, you might have a universal beam as a column, but it's leaning over. Now with columns you can't tilt them over. Alright, with members normally go in on a level plane, but they also go in by matching a plane. Now saying that, if I go and draw a surface, now this surface I'm going to put in is only temporary. It's temporary because I want to get it leaning over, so it's a U-beam that leans over as a column. So basically, if I go and draw any surface, it doesn't really matter what I use, but the first 2 points I pick are basically sort of along the fascia line. So if I pick a point there and then drag along here and then go to the left, you'll notice the arrow coming out, and that arrow points up. So if I basically just pick from there and there and there, that gives me a surface in there of which now I can slope. So if I leave the lower point at 0, which is back here, and the upper point I want to slope. So I want to slope that by dropping the slope type down and selecting degrees and keying a value, and let's just for instance say we want 85 degrees and lock that in and hit OK. If we go and have a look at our Well, we better place another camera just to make sure we've got the right angle here to show you. You can see that surface is sloping. Now if I go back to the 2D and just come in close onto it, now to get my sloping column I'll use a member. So remember the tapered one I used a footing, for a vertical one I've used a column, but for this column that I want to slope in the air, I'm going to use a member, and I'm going to select members by matching plane. Now if I come and select, just right click and go collapse all, if I go and grab say the U-beam here, there's a U-beam, what it's asking me to do down the bottom left hand corner is select a surface. So this is the surface I want, and then I can go and just pick 2 points from there to there. Right click and finish. We've now finished with that surface. You can delete it because you can go and grab that column and duplicate it. So we'll just bring another one down here somewhere. Now we'll go and have a look at that second camera we put in there, and there's your column sloping. Okay, so basically I can then just pull that down by grabbing that top part to different heights. It's not accurate, but it does the job. You can just move that in position or wherever you want it to be, and you've got a sloping column. Now, the third thing I want to show you as far as tips and tricks are concerned with columns. Now, you might have an array of columns coming across a veranda. You might have a situation where you've got piers or posts underneath your house and you want them in certain positions. Okay, so the easiest way to do that is to set up a grid. Now I use a wall and one of my construction lines to set up the grid that I want and position things where I want them. So let's say we're going to use a 90mm post. So in that case we use a 90mm wide construction line, which is actually a wall. If I now go and draw something here, for instance, to represent any shape, and I want posts in there, and I want posts across here, I want posts there. I know it doesn't make sense, but at the end of the day what I'm doing is creating a grid to give me the shape that I want, because now using the 90mm wide construction line, which is a wall, I can touch that and I can adjust all the sizes to be exact where I want them to be. So I want that to be 5.5. Okay, and I might want that dimension there to be 1650, and I might want that dimension there to be 2100, and I might want, click on that one and I want that dimension there to be 1500. So you can see I've actually been able to manipulate that to give me the shape of what I want. Now the columns, as you know from the previous lesson, will snap to the center point. So the center point of my 90mm column will snap to the center point of each of these intersecting walls. So all I have to do now is go and grab the 90mm column and come across here and pick the points on every intersection where I want the columns, and it automatically goes in there. Just take a little bit just to go through these last couple of picks. Okay, if I go and have a look at that, there's my columns all standing up in the air. Don't worry about the hole in the ground, we'll get rid of that shortly, but you can see even the construction lines just sitting on the ground, alright, but all the columns are in the right position. Now, before you delete your temporary construction line, what I do is I do the dimensions, because it is much easier to do the dimensions when you've got the walls there than to have to do them individually with your linear dimension style. So all I'm doing is setting up my current style, as we've done with the dimensioning when we did that lesson, and I want the interior style. So all I'm doing is setting out as the current style. Now I can go and grab my auto interior dimensions and go, I want a point there. I better go and turn it on in the view filter first. Now go and grab that and pick a few points across there, and as you can see I've got my dimensions done. I shouldn't have done them so close to the house, but there you have it. All sort of dimension, you move those out and then you can do your vertical dimensions. Now the last thing you need to do if you don't want them there is to get rid of that construction line. So if you select one and right click and you then go select all similar, it'll find them, then right click again and delete them, and what you've got left is the post sitting there in the right position with your dimensions on. So now if I just go and turn off the dimensions, just so it's not so cluttered, and just have a look at that in 3D, you'll see there's all my posts in the correct position that I want to do it for whatever structure I'm going to build. Okay, so what we've covered is, in this tips and tricks, basically your tapered columns, which we're using a footing and elevating it up and giving it the height we need. Also the sloping columns for the U-beams, which I've deleted, using a surface as your temporary construction work, so that you allow it to use the members by matching plane option. That gives you your sloping columns. And then the last thing is to basically give you a grid layout using walls and your construction lines to dimension and lay out wherever you want your posts, and then snapping your post into the walls, dimensioning it, and then erasing your construction work if you don't want to leave it there. I hope that those tips and tricks will be helpful for you, and we'll now move on to our next lesson.